In the heart of a frozen park, Rex waited, pregnant, wounded, and chained to a bench as the storm swallowed the world. Her body trembled, not from fear but from the effort to protect the lives growing inside her. The cold burned, the chain tightened, and silence felt like a death sentence. Every instinct told her this was the end. Then footsteps cut through the snow. Ethan, a broken American veteran running from his own past, stopped when no one else would. One glance, one choice. What he saw wasn't just an abandoned K9, but a soul refusing to give up. By sunrise, the storm hadn't won. Rex lived. New life breathed. And two survivors found the miracle they never expected. The wind had teeth. It cut through Pine Hollow like something alive, scraping against bone and memory alike. Snow fell in heavy, deliberate sheets, the kind that didn't rush, didn't scream, just erased. Roads, footprints, sound. At -15 degrees Celsius, even the town's heartbeat seemed to slow, retreating inward. Ethan ran anyway. His boots struck the packed snow with a steady, economical rhythm. No music, no phone, no distractions. Running wasn't exercise anymore. It was containment. If he kept moving, the images stayed behind him. Faces frozen in moments he couldn't change. Commands that came too late. Choices that echoed long after the gunfire stopped. Pine Hollow's river park lay empty, swallowed by white. Benches hunched under drifts like defeated soldiers. The river itself was a black scar beneath ice, whispering softly as it moved. Ethan's breath steamed in controlled bursts. His shoulders stayed square. His eyes scanned automatically. Habits carved deeper than muscle. Then the sound cut through everything. Not a bark, not a whine. Breathing, strained, uneven, wet at the edges. It didn't belong to wind or water. It came again, followed by a pause that lasted a second too long. Ethan slowed without thinking. His body stopped before his mind caught up. He stepped off the path, boots sinking into fresh powder. The sound came from beneath a half-buried bench near a frozen cottonwood. Ethan crouched low, weight balanced, hands open. Shadows clung there, thick and deceptive. At first, he saw nothing. Then the shape resolved. A dog lay pressed flat against the ground, chain pulled tight around a metal post. Her body trembled, not in panic, but effort. Snow crusted along her back and muzzle, melting and refreezing with each shallow breath. Even before he saw the wound on her front paw, raw, split from ice and restraint, Ethan recognized the posture. Controlled, alert, conserving strength. This wasn't a stray. She lifted her head when he shifted closer. A German Shepherd, female, large even beneath the weight she'd lost. Her coat was dulled black and sable, matted with ice. One ear stood half raised, the other drooped with fatigue. Her belly, tight, unmistakably swollen, signaled late pregnancy. Her eyes locked onto his. Amber, clear, evaluating. No fear there, no plea. She didn't bark, didn't growl. She watched him the way trained dogs watched handlers, waiting for intent. Something tightened in Ethan's chest. He'd seen that look before. Men pinned down under fire, bleeding quietly, waiting for the moment that mattered. The chain rattled softly as the dog tested it once, then settled again, choosing stillness over waste. Whoever had left her here hadn't done it by accident. Ethan pulled off his gloves. The metal burned immediately as he reached for the chain. Ice fused into every link. He worked slowly, deliberately, aware that sudden movement could trigger defense. She didn't lunge, didn't retreat. Instead, she shifted her weight, angling her body so her side, Her abdomen was shielded. That told him everything. She wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting what she carried. The chain finally gave with a dull snap against the post. Ethan froze, watching for reaction. None came. The dog rose with visible effort, hind legs trembling. She took one step toward him, then stopped. She didn't cross the space. She waited. Ethan shrugged out of his insulated jacket and spread it on the snow. Only then did she move, stepping carefully onto the fabric, lowering herself with a thin exhale that scraped something raw inside him. He knelt, resting one knee in the snow, slowing his breathing. Up close, the details sharpened. Old scars along her shoulders where a harness had rubbed raw, pads cracked and worn unevenly. This wasn't one bad night. This was prolonged exposure. Fear held in check by discipline. Ethan extended his hand, palm open, stopping inches from her neck. She leaned forward first, pressed her muzzle briefly against his wrist, then pulled back. Permission granted. He exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Carefully, he wrapped the jacket around her, mindful of her swollen belly, and lifted. She tensed for a heartbeat, then settled, her head resting against his chest. Her heart raced, but steady, alive, fighting. The weight in his arms wasn't just physical. It was responsibility, unasked for, unavoidable. Snow continued to fall, covering the bench, the broken chain, the place where she had waited. The park looked unchanged, indifferent. Ethan adjusted his grip, turning his body to shield her from the wind, and began walking back toward the road. His pace quickened. The dog didn't struggle, didn't look back. Her eyes stayed forward, alert even as exhaustion dragged at her frame. He understood then, with sudden clarity. No report would record this. No order had told him to stop. No commendation would come. But some lines, once crossed, could not be uncrossed. At the truck, he settled her onto the back seat, padding the space with blankets he kept for emergencies he told himself would never come. She allowed it, watching him the entire time, measuring. He closed the door gently. The engine turned over. Warmth crept in. Snow hammered the windshield, relentless. Ethan rested his forehead briefly against the steering wheel. He hadn't planned to save anything tonight, but the night hadn't let him pass. The cabin stood where the road gave up. Pine Hollow thinned here, trees crowding close as if to keep secrets warm. Ethan cut the engine and listened. Wind moved through the pines with a low, steady moan. Snow ticked against the hood, soft but insistent. He opened the back door slowly. The dog watched him immediately. She hadn't shifted position during the drive, despite every jolt and slide on the frozen road. Her body stayed curled to protect her belly, head lifted just enough to track movement. When Ethan reached in, she didn't flinch, but she didn't lean forward either. Assessment. Still assessing. "That's fair," he murmured. He lifted her carefully, mindful of the injured paw, and carried her inside. Warmth rushed to meet them. Wood smoke, dry air, the faint scent of coffee grounds he never finished. The cabin was small, built for function over comfort. A single room, a table, a couch that had seen better decades, a stove that never quite stopped working. He laid her down near the fire, patting the floor with folded blankets. She lowered herself slowly, breath hitching once before settling into a careful stillness. Her eyes never left him. Ethan moved deliberately, keeping his hands visible. He fetched water, poured it into a shallow bowl, slid it within reach. She didn't drink. Not yet. He set out food. Same result. Trust wasn't given quickly by creatures like this. He sat on the floor a few feet away and waited. Minutes passed. The fire crackled. Wind pressed at the walls. The dog shifted slightly, angling her body so her flank, her swollen belly, was shielded from the open space of the room. She positioned herself where she could see the door and the window in one glance. That wasn't fear. That was planning. Ethan recognized it the way you recognized a language you hadn't spoken in years. The room didn't relax him. It didn't have to. It just needed to be predictable. He noticed the details now. The faint scars along her shoulders. Harness marks, old but deliberate. The split pad on her front paw, raw and angry beneath the ice burn. She licked it once, then stopped, conserving energy. "You're not a stray," he said quietly. Her ear flicked. The collar around her neck was worn and cracked, the stitching nearly gone. Ethan reached for it, pausing when her eyes sharpened. He held still until the tension eased, then eased 2 fingers beneath the leather. There it was. A torn strip of nylon, half hidden beneath the collar. Faded lettering, only one word still legible. Rex. Ethan swallowed. Names mattered. They carried weight. You didn't name what you planned to abandon. You didn't keep a name on something disposable. "Rex," he said softly. The dog's head lifted a fraction. Not recognition, something deeper. Acceptance. Ethan sat back on his heels. "All right," he said. "Rex it is." He cleaned the wound on her paw as gently as he could, using warm water and cloths he boiled on the stove. Rex allowed it, muscles tensing once, then settling. She never snapped, never pulled away. When the pain peaked, she turned her head aside and breathed through it. That did something to him. He'd seen men break for less. When he finished, he wrapped the paw carefully and leaned back, exhaustion pressing down now that adrenaline had loosened its grip. Rex finally drank, slow and steady. She ate a little, not much, enough. Ethan watched her the way he watched the horizon before dawn, without expectation, without rush. Night deepened. Snow kept falling. Ethan stretched out on the couch, boots still on, body angled so he could see Rex without looming over her. He closed his eyes. Sleep didn't come. Instead, memory did. A desert night. A K9 handler down. A dog whining once before going silent. Orders shouted through static, the weight of a body in his arms that wasn't supposed to be still. Ethan's eyes opened. Rex was standing. He froze, heart thudding. She moved carefully, weight shifting to spare the injured paw. She paced the perimeter of the room, stopping at the door, then the window. She sniffed once, twice. Her ears flattened briefly, then rose again. She wasn't panicking. She was mapping. She returned to the blankets and lowered herself with effort, breath thin but controlled. Only then did Ethan realize his fists were clenched. "You don't miss much," he said. Rex's gaze flicked to him, held, then softened just enough. Ethan exhaled. He brewed coffee he didn't drink. He checked the weather. Worse by morning, roads closing, clinics likely short-staffed. He'd need to move early if he wanted help for Rex. He grabbed a flashlight and did a slow sweep of the cabin's exterior. Snow had already erased their tracks. The world beyond the trees was gone. Good. Back inside, Rex had shifted again, angling herself closer to the stove. She watched him approach, then, slowly, rested her head against the blanket, eyes half-lidded but awake. That was new. Trust didn't arrive with ceremony. It came in inches. Ethan sat beside her, back against the wall, knees drawn up. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. "You're safe here," he said, not knowing if he meant her or himself. Rex's breathing evened out, deeper now. Sleep took her in stages, vigilance loosening one notch at a time. Ethan stayed awake until the fire burned low. He understood something then, with the clarity that only came when everything else went quiet. Whoever had left Rex in that park hadn't misjudged her strength. They had underestimated her discipline, and discipline didn't vanish under pressure. It adapted. Morning came without warmth. Light filtered through low clouds, pale and thin, settling over Pine Hollow like an afterthought. The storm had eased just enough to tempt movement, but not forgiveness. Snow lay in clean, deceptive sheets, hiding ice beneath. Ethan loaded the truck carefully. Rex watched from the cabin doorway as he worked, her posture guarded but steady. She followed him when he lifted her into the back seat, moving with effort, never rushing. The injured paw touched down last, always last. Pain managed, not surrendered to. He started the engine and let it idle, heat creeping in. Rex angled her body again, belly shielded, head up, eyes tracking the road ahead. The veterinary clinic sat near the edge of town, a low building with wide windows fogged from warmth inside. The sign creaked softly in the wind. Ethan parked and paused, resting his hands on the wheel. "You're not going back," he said quietly. Rex's ears flicked. She didn't look away. Inside, the bell above the door chimed once. The woman behind the counter looked up immediately. Dr. Mara Ellis was in her early 40s, lean, composed, her dark hair pulled into a practical knot that had come loose in places. Her eyes were the kind that missed very little, not out of suspicion, but repetition. Years of pattern recognition did that. When she saw Rex, her expression shifted. Not to panic, to focus. "Bring her straight in," she said, already moving. The exam room was warm and bright, the hum of equipment steady and reassuring. Rex tracked every movement as Mara worked, hands precise, voice calm, touch deliberate. She palpated gently, listened, observed. Rex stayed still, muscles tight but controlled. "She's trained," Mara said without looking up, "and pregnant." Ethan nodded. K9. Mara's jaw set slightly. The examination took longer than usual. Rex was underweight, dehydrated, with signs of prolonged cold exposure. The paw wound was angry but clean. No infection yet. Late pregnancy. Very late. "She's been outside for a while," Mara said. "Not lost, placed." The word landed heavy. Mara scanned for a microchip. The reader beeped once, then again. She frowned, adjusted settings, tried a second scanner. "There is a chip," she said slowly, "but the record's incomplete." She pulled the data up on her screen. Sections were missing. Timestamps overwritten. Ownership fields truncated. Medical notes reduced to vague entries that explained nothing. "This doesn't happen by accident," Mara said. She leaned back slightly, studying Rex's face. "Someone altered this." Ethan felt a familiar pressure behind his eyes. Not anger yet. Something colder, Mara continued. "Working dogs usually have redundant records. Handlers, units, clinics. This has been cleaned." Rex shifted, placing herself closer to Ethan's leg, her flank pressed against his knee, grounding. Ethan rested his hand lightly on her back. "Can you trace it?" he asked. Mara nodded once. "I can try." She printed what remained, added her own notes with meticulous care. Condition, behavior, pregnancy stage, signs of neglect. She photographed the paw, the scars along Rex's shoulders, the worn pads. "Evidence matters," she said quietly, "especially when someone hopes it won't." Ethan understood. When they left the clinic, The sky had darkened again, clouds folding in on themselves. Snow threatened. Pine Hollow liked to close doors slowly. Mara handed him a folder at the door. "If anyone comes asking," she said, "this is your protection." He thanked her and loaded Rex back into the truck. They drove in silence until Rex stiffened. Not gradually, immediately. Her ears flattened, her head lifted, her nostrils flared as she drew in the air. Ethan felt it then, the shift he'd learned to trust more than sight. "What is it?" he murmured. Rex leaned forward, weight bracing despite her pregnancy. The truck slowed as Ethan followed her line of sight. A house stood just off the main road. Modest, neatly kept. Fresh paint. Walkway shoveled to bare concrete. The kind of place people passed without a second glance. Rex's body tightened. This wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. Ethan parked at the curb and stepped out, posture deliberate. Rex followed, staying close to his leg, movements slower now but purposeful. She wasn't pulling toward the house. She was bracing for it. The door opened before Ethan could knock. An elderly woman stood there, small and slightly stooped, wrapped in a pale cardigan. Her eyes widened at the sight of Rex, and something broke through her careful composure. "Oh," she whispered. Rex stepped forward and pressed gently against the woman's legs, protective, familiar. Relief flickered across the woman's face. Footsteps sounded behind her. A man appeared, middle-aged, broad-shouldered, beard trimmed neat. His smile was polite, practiced. "Can we help you?" he asked. Another presence joined them, a woman in her 40s, posture perfect, smile smooth. She held a small cup in her hand. Rex reacted instantly. A low growl vibrated through her chest. Not loud, not wild, precise. She stepped sideways, placing herself between the cup and the older woman. The woman froze, laughed lightly. "She's protective," she said. "Too protective." Ethan said nothing. He watched Rex. Rex wasn't reacting to tone or movement. She was reacting to intent. The older woman reached hesitantly toward the cup. Rex blocked her path again, pressing her side gently but firmly against the woman's knee. "Easy," the man said, stepping forward. Rex didn't bare her teeth, didn't retreat. She held position. "She's trained," Ethan said evenly. "This isn't anxiety." Silence stretched thin. The visit ended politely. Too politely. Outside, Rex exhaled deeply, tension easing only once the house was behind them. Ethan rested his hand on her shoulder. He didn't need the altered chip to understand what he'd just seen. Control disguised as care. Decisions framed as kindness. Rex hadn't been abandoned because she was weak. She'd been removed because she wouldn't comply. Ethan didn't return to the cabin right away. He drove past the river, past the old sawmill, letting the truck idle at the far edge of town where Pine Hollow thinned into trees again. Rex lay quiet on the back seat, eyes open, tracking reflections in the glass. The tension hadn't left her. It had simply gone dormant. The house replayed itself in his mind. Too clean, too calm. The kind of order that didn't come from care, but control. He turned the truck around. The street looked the same as before. Neat, shoveled, ordinary. That was the point. Ethan parked across from the house and cut the engine. He didn't approach. He watched. Rex shifted immediately, rising with effort and bracing herself against the seat. Her ears flattened, her nose lifted, testing the air through the cracked window. Same reaction, same certainty. Ethan waited. Minutes passed. A curtain moved. A shape crossed the hallway. The door opened and closed again. The woman, the one with the cup, stepped onto the porch, phone pressed to her ear. She spoke softly, smiling at nothing, then glanced down the street. Her eyes flicked toward Ethan's truck. Just once. That was enough. Ethan started the engine and pulled away without hurry. Back at the cabin, the storm found its way back in. Wind pressed harder now, rattling the walls. Ethan settled Rex near the stove again, re-wrapped her paw, refreshed water. She drank more this time, ate a little more too. Trust, inch by inch. He sat at the table with the folder from the clinic open in front of him. Mara's notes were precise, clinical, undeniable. Altered records, prolonged exposure, late pregnancy, removed. That word kept circling back. Not abandoned, not lost. Removed. Ethan checked his phone. No service. The storm had swallowed the signal. He set the phone down and leaned back, eyes closing for a moment longer than he intended. A knock snapped him upright. 3 sharp raps. Rex was on her feet instantly. Not barking, not charging. She placed herself between Ethan and the door, body angled, stance low but solid. Her growl stayed locked behind her chest, controlled and ready. Ethan moved slowly, hand resting on her back, not restraining, just present. He opened the door. The man from the house stood on the porch, snow dusting his shoulders. His smile was still there, stretched thinner now by the cold. "Afternoon," he said. "I thought I recognized your truck." Ethan said nothing. The man's eyes flicked past him, taking in the cabin, the stove, Rex's silhouette behind Ethan's legs. "But that dog," the man said lightly. "She yours?" Rex stiffened. "No," Ethan replied. "Not yet." The man chuckled as if it were a joke. "She belongs to someone," he said. "We've been looking for her." Ethan held his gaze. "Funny," he said evenly. "She didn't look like someone who was being looked for." The smile slipped for half a second. "Animals wander," the man said. "She must have gotten loose." "Chained to a post?" Ethan asked. Silence stretched. Wind pushed between them, cold and impatient. "We take care of our own," the man said finally. "That dog was stressed, dangerous even, especially in her condition." Rex growled then, low, precise. Her body shifted half a step forward. The man took a step back without realizing it. "She doesn't seem dangerous," Ethan said. "She seems disciplined." The man's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're dealing with." Ethan leaned forward just enough for the words to land. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with." Another pause. Then the man straightened his coat, composure snapping back into place. "If you're smart," he said, "you'll return her. Tonight." Ethan's eyes didn't leave his. "If you're smart," he replied, "you'll leave." The man studied him for a long moment, weighing something Ethan didn't need to see. Then he nodded once. "Good luck," he said, already turning away. The door closed softly behind him. Ethan locked it. Rex exhaled, tension bleeding from her frame. But she stayed alert, pacing once around the room before settling again. Ethan knelt beside her, resting his forehead briefly against hers. "You did good," he murmured. Night fell hard. The storm returned with teeth this time. Wind howled. Snow slammed sideways, blotting out the windows. Somewhere in the dark, a vehicle passed too slowly, tires crunching deliberately before fading away. Ethan didn't sleep. Near midnight, headlights flared through the trees. Rex rose again, posture rigid. Ethan grabbed his jacket and stepped outside, boots sinking into drifts. A pickup idled near the tree line, lights off now, engine humming low. A shape moved near the driver's side. "Hey!" Ethan called. The engine revved. Snow sprayed as the truck fishtailed away, disappearing into the storm. Ethan stood there until the cold bit deep, then turned back inside. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It was pressure. Rex shifted restlessly as the night wore on. Her breathing changed, slower, heavier. Ethan noticed the signs and felt his chest tighten. "Not yet," he said softly, though he wasn't sure who he was convincing. By morning, the storm had sealed them in completely. Roads gone, power flickering. Ethan sat by the fire with Rex at his side, one hand resting against her flank, feeling the subtle tightening beneath her skin. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to wait for permission. And whoever wanted Rex back wasn't finished trying. The storm didn't break. It leaned in. Wind pressed against the cabin as if testing seams, rattling the stovepipe, worrying the shutters. Ethan woke before dawn with the same instinct that had pulled him out of sleep on deployment. Something had shifted. Not outside. Inside the pattern. Rex was standing. Her body was rigid, ears flattened, nose lifted. She wasn't looking at the door or the window. She was listening to the silence between gusts, to the spaces where sound should have been. Ethan rolled off the couch and pulled on his jacket. He moved without hurry, keeping his breathing slow. "Easy," he murmured, resting his hand against Rex's shoulder. Her muscles trembled beneath his palm, not with fear, with readiness. A crunch came from the tree line, then another. Footsteps, measured, deliberate, too steady for a drunk, too confident for a lost hiker. Ethan killed the stove light and stepped to the window, peering through a narrow gap. Snow fell sideways, blurring edges, but the shapes were there. Two figures moving toward the cabin, heads down against the wind. A third lingered near the truck, engine idling low. Rex growled once. Low, precise. Ethan opened the door and stepped out into the cold. "Turn around," he called, voice carrying clean through the storm. The figures stopped. One of them laughed. It was the man from the house. The smile gone now, replaced by something harder. He lifted his hands, palms out, as if in peace. "Just here to collect what's ours," he said. "No need to make this ugly." Ethan took a step forward, boots biting into ice. "You don't own her." The man shrugged. "Paper says otherwise." Rex appeared in the doorway behind Ethan, her silhouette framed by firelight. She didn't bark. She didn't advance. She simply stood there, belly heavy, eyes locked. The second man shifted uncomfortably. "She's unstable," he said. "Pregnant. Dangerous." "She's disciplined," Ethan replied. "You're not." The man's jaw tightened. He nodded once. That was the signal. The third figure rushed from the truck. Everything compressed into motion. Ethan moved first, pivoting, closing distance before the man could grab him. A shoulder check sent the attacker sprawling into a drift. Snow exploded upward, swallowing the impact. The second man lunged, catching Ethan's arm. They went down hard, rolling, breath knocked loose. Ethan drove an elbow into the man's chest, not to injure, just to create space. The man wheezed, scrabbling backward. Boots slipped. Someone fell. Someone cursed. Rex burst from the doorway. She didn't charge blindly. She cut across the space, placing herself between Ethan and the man from the house. Teeth bared now, a warning that needed no translation. Her growl vibrated through the storm, deep and unwavering. The man froze. "Call her off," he shouted. Ethan didn't look away. "Leave." The third man was back on his feet, snow plastered to his jacket. He raised something, Metal flashed in the stormlight. Not a gun, a tire iron. Ethan stepped into the swing. Pain flared along his forearm as he blocked it, the shock numbing fingers instantly. He drove forward, slamming the man into the truck's fender. The metal rang out, sharp and final. The tire iron dropped, swallowed by snow. Sirens wailed in the distance. Not close. Not yet. But coming. The man from the house took a step back, eyes darting between Rex and the road. He weighed the moment, the way men always did when risk tipped against reward. "This isn't over," he said. Ethan met his gaze. "It is for tonight." They retreated, fast now, clumsy in the drifts. The truck fishtailed as it pulled away, taillights vanishing into white. Ethan stood there until the cold sank through his bones. Rex pressed against his leg, breath rapid but steady. He crouched, checking her quickly. Belly, paw, ribs. No new injury. Her eyes stayed sharp, scanning, then returning to him. You did good," he said, voice rough. Inside, the cabin felt smaller. Ethan wrapped his arm with a cloth, tight enough to slow the swelling. It would bruise. It would heal. He'd had worse. He turned his attention back to Rex and noticed the change. Her breathing had shifted, not shallow now, deeper, uneven. She paced once, twice, then lowered herself with a strained exhale that scraped something raw in his chest. "No," he said softly. "Not yet." Rex's ears flattened. A low sound escaped her throat. Not fear. Strain. Ethan checked the time. Checked the weather. Roads were gone. Phone showed no service. The clinic was unreachable. He knelt beside her, grounding his breath. "Okay," he said, making the word solid. "Okay." He cleared space near the stove, laying down fresh blankets, warming water. He remembered the instructions Mara had given him, what to watch for, what not to do. He repeated them in his head like a checklist. Outside, the storm howled louder, sealing the cabin in. Rex's body worked with quiet determination. Contractions came and went, measured, relentless. She endured without complaint, eyes half-lidded but focused. When the pain peaked, she leaned into Ethan's hand, trusting him to stay. Hours stretched thin. Ethan spoke softly, a steady stream of nothing and everything. Names of trees, the sound of the river, the promise of morning. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He stayed. When the first pup arrived, slick and trembling, time stopped. Ethan's hands shook, not from cold, but awe. He cleared the airway the way he'd been taught, heart hammering as a tiny chest fluttered, then rose again. Alive. Rex's focus sharpened. She licked the pup immediately, pulling it close, arranging it with careful nudges. 1 became 2. 2 became 3. By dawn, 6 small bodies lay pressed against her belly, breathing unevenly but determined. Rex lowered her head, exhaustion finally claiming its due. Ethan sat back against the wall, muscles aching in unfamiliar ways. He laughed once, breathless and disbelieving, then pressed his knuckles to his mouth and breathed through the surge. Outside, the storm eased. Inside, life had arrived anyway. The cabin had gone quiet in a way that felt wrong. Not the peaceful quiet that followed exhaustion, but the kind that pressed in, attentive. Ethan was rinsing cloths by the sink when Rex's head snapped up. Her ears flattened. Her body tensed so fast it looked like a wire had been pulled tight inside her. "No," Ethan said softly. "Easy." Rex rose anyway, too quickly for a dog who had given birth only hours earlier. Her hind legs wobbled, then locked. A sound tore from her chest. Not a bark, not a growl. An alarm. She moved to Ethan and caught the fabric of his pant leg between her teeth, tugged once, hard. Ethan froze just long enough to recognize the signal. He'd seen it in men seconds before an ambush, instinct moving faster than language. He grabbed his jacket, boots, and the truck keys in one motion. "Okay," he said. "I'm with you." The puppies stirred, tiny squeaks filling the room. Rex didn't look back. Whatever had pulled her to attention wasn't here. It was out there. The drive into town was brutal. Snow erased the road in uneven sheets, headlights carving a narrow tunnel through white. Rex sat rigid in the passenger seat, nose lifted, drawing the air in sharp, repeated pulls. She whined once, low and brief, then fell silent, eyes fixed forward with absolute certainty. Ethan trusted that certainty more than the road beneath his tires. They reached the edge of the river park, and Rex lunged toward the door before the engine had fully stopped. Ethan unclipped her and followed as she pulled him forward, her pace slower now, but no less determined. She didn't wander. She chose a path and held it, cutting through drifts toward the darker stretch where trees thinned and the river widened. Snow swallowed their tracks almost as quickly as they made them. Then Ethan saw her. A small shape half buried near the bank, a pale sleeve against white. One arm twisted awkwardly, fingers frozen in a reach that had never found balance. Ethan dropped to his knees. The woman's skin was frighteningly pale. Her lips carried a blue tinge. He checked for breath. There, faint and irregular. A pulse fluttered weakly beneath his fingers. Hypothermia. Rex pressed against the woman's chest, letting out a series of sharp, urgent barks that cut through the storm like flares. Ethan shrugged out of his jacket and wrapped it around the woman, pulling her close, shielding her from the wind with his body. "Stay with me," he said steadily, voice meant to anchor more than instruct. He kept talking, counting breaths, naming simple things, refusing the silence any opening. Rex broke away suddenly, spinning toward the path. She ran a few yards, then stopped, barking again, short, precise. She wasn't leaving. She was calling him to something. Ethan hesitated only a second before following. A vehicle sat parked awkwardly off the path, engine cold, windows dark, already dusted with fresh snow. It looked staged, too neat in its abandonment. Rex struck the rear bumper with her paws, then the trunk. Ethan's stomach tightened. He forced the latch. The lid groaned against ice and lifted. Inside were neatly packed items that didn't belong to a casual drive. Multiple pill bottles, a folded blanket, a thermos, and a thick manila folder sealed in plastic. The top page bore the woman's name in clean, printed letters, dates and signatures already filled in. Preparation. Not an accident. Ethan slammed the trunk shut and ran back to the riverbank. He pulled his phone free, hands steady despite the surge of adrenaline, and relayed their location to emergency services with the clipped precision of someone used to chaos. Rex had returned to the woman's side, pressing her body close, lending heat and presence. The wind howled, snow driving sideways, swallowing sound. Ethan kept the woman awake, ignoring the cold that crept deeper into his own muscles. Sirens finally cut through the storm. Relief hit him so hard his hands shook. Paramedics arrived first, moving with practiced urgency. "Moderate hypothermia," one said, voice calm. "But you got her in time." Police followed close behind, lights painting the park in harsh color. Ethan gestured toward the car. "That vehicle matters," he said simply. "Check the trunk." The officer's expression changed immediately. As the woman was lifted onto a stretcher, Rex watched intently, body tense until the ambulance doors closed. Only then did she sag slightly, exhaustion finally overtaking adrenaline. Ethan rested a hand on her back, feeling the tremor ease. Snow continued to fall, indifferent. At the hospital, the room was bright and sterile, a contrast so sharp it almost hurt. The woman lay small beneath white sheets, tubes tracing quiet lines of breath and heartbeat. Rex sat close to Ethan's leg, alert but calm. When the woman opened her eyes, they found Rex first. She reached out with a trembling hand. Rex stepped forward and placed one solid paw gently over her fingers. The contact was deliberate, grounding. Words came slowly then. Confusion, being told she misremembered things, feeling managed rather than cared for. Ethan listened without interruption. This wasn't testimony yet. It was permission. By evening, the storm had begun to ease, leaving behind a silence heavier than the snow it abandoned. An investigator spoke with Ethan briefly. Statements would be needed, evidence reviewed. Ethan nodded. He had expected that. What he hadn't expected was the quiet resolve settling in his chest. This wasn't about stopping a crime with force. It was about attention, paid at the right moment, held long enough to matter. Rex leaned against his leg, eyes half-lidded now, her work for the day complete. Outside, the river moved beneath its ice, carrying away the last of the storm. The town gathered without meaning to. By the second morning after the storm, Pine Hollow felt smaller, its silence pressed tight by questions no one wanted to ask out loud. The hospital corridors hummed with careful footsteps. Doors opened softly, conversations lowered when Ethan passed. Rex stayed at his side. Her pace was slower now, body still recovering, but her attention never drifted. She watched reflections in glass, tracked movements behind doors, measured spaces. The edge hadn't dulled, it had refined. In a small conference room near the nurse's station, Ethan sat across from a man who introduced himself as Deputy Hale. He was broad-shouldered, beard rimmed with frost that hadn't fully melted from his jacket. His eyes were steady, curious without being invasive. "We'll take this step by step," Hale said, sliding a recorder onto the table. "You can stop any time." Ethan nodded. "I won't." They started with the night at the park. The chain, the bench, the paw wound. Hale listened without interruption, writing only when a detail mattered. When Ethan described the trunk, pill bottles, the folder, the pre-filled signatures, Hale's pen paused. "Prepared," Hale said quietly. "Yes," Ethan replied. "Not panic. Planning." Hale nodded once, as if that confirmed something he already suspected. "We'll need the vet's documentation." "She has it," Ethan said. "And the chip data." That changed the room. Hale leaned back. "Altered records," he said. "That pushes this beyond negligence." Rex shifted, placing her body closer to Ethan's chair, eyes flicking to the door when footsteps passed. Hale noticed, but didn't comment. Down the hall, a door opened. The elderly woman, Mrs. Calder, was being wheeled back from imaging. She looked smaller than she had by the river, wrapped in blankets that seemed too big for her frame. When she saw Rex, her face softened. Rex rose and walked to her without hesitation, placing herself at the wheelchair's side. Not pressing, not leaning, just present. Mrs. Calder's hand found Rex's fur. She breathed out, long and unguarded. Later, when the room was quieter, a social worker sat with Mrs. Calder while Ethan waited just outside. He could hear murmurs through the wall, fragments that didn't form sentences at first. Then clarity, thin but steady. "I was told it was for my safety. They said I forgot things." I didn't. They said the cold would help me sleep. Ethan closed his eyes. In another wing of the hospital, Dr. Mara Ellis laid out her folder on a steel table for an investigator from the state. Photographs, timestamps, behavioral notes. She didn't accuse. She explained. Patterns did the rest. Working dogs removed during pregnancy, she said evenly. Records shortened, exposure prolonged, ownership reassigned to caretakers with plausible deniability. The investigator flipped pages, jaw tightening. You're saying this isn't a one-off? Mara met his gaze. I'm saying it's repeatable. That afternoon, the house on the shoveled street filled with quiet movement. Not sirens, not shouting, just professionals doing careful work. Boxes carried out. A computer tower unplugged. A trunk opened again, this time under cameras. Ethan stood across the street with Rex, watching. The man from the house, his name finally surfaced in conversation, stood on the porch, arms folded tight, smile nowhere to be found. The woman with the cup kept her posture perfect, hands clasped as if in prayer. They were questioned separately. Their stories matched at first. Stress, care, difficult decisions. Then the questions narrowed. Why was the car prepared before the storm? Why were signatures dated days ahead? Why were medication levels inconsistent with prescriptions? The answers thinned. That evening, the town hall opened its doors. Folding chairs scraped softly against the floor as neighbors took their seats. No one had announced a meeting. It simply happened. At the front sat representatives from protective services, local law enforcement, and a state investigator who spoke less than he listened. Ethan stood when asked, Rex at his side. He didn't dramatize. He described the chain, the altered chip, Rex's reactions inside the house, the trunk, the riverbank. He let the facts stand without ornament. When he finished, the room stayed quiet. Mrs. Calder spoke next. Her voice shook at first, then steadied. I was told I was confused, she said. That my fear was ungratefulness. That care meant not asking questions. She paused, fingers curling into Rex's fur. I wasn't confused, she said. I was being managed. The room shifted. The man from the house spoke of responsibility. The woman spoke of love and exhaustion. The investigator asked his questions anyway. Precise, patient, unhurried. By the time he finished, explanations sounded rehearsed. Decisions were made without spectacle. Temporary guardianship reassigned. Oversight established. Charges pending. Investigations widened. No one clapped. Rex moved closer to Mrs. Calder, body angled outward, eyes scanning once before settling. Her work, again, was simple and exact. That night, Ethan returned to the cabin alone with Rex. The puppies slept in a warm knot near the stove, unaware of anything beyond milk and heat. Ethan sat on the floor, back against the couch, exhaustion pressing in layers. He felt it then. Not triumph. Alignment. The truth hadn't needed volume. It had needed witnesses willing to stand still. Rex shifted and rested her head against his knee. He placed his hand on her neck, feeling the steady rhythm beneath his palm. Almost there, he murmured. Outside, the river moved under its skin of ice, carrying the last of the storm away. Spring reached Pine Hollow quietly. Snow retreated in thin veins along the riverbanks, leaving damp earth and the first stubborn shoots of green. The town exhaled. Windows opened. Boots lightened. The river sounded different now, less guarded, more willing. Ethan noticed the change in Rex before he noticed it in himself. Her gait eased, careful but confident. The constant edge softened. She still checked doors and windows, still mapped rooms with her eyes, but she looked up more often now, checked in, then returned her focus forward. The puppies were stronger, clumsier, loud in the way only life learning its shape could be. 6 small bodies tumbled over one another near the stove, paws too big for their balance, ears still deciding where they belonged. Rex watched them with a discipline that had shifted from vigilance to routine. Protection, yes, but also patience. Mrs. Calder moved into a small home overlooking the water. It wasn't grand. It was bright. Light filled the rooms in the afternoons, settling on shelves and chairs that had room to be used. Care arrived on her terms now. Meals when she asked, conversation when she wished, silence when she needed it. She laughed sometimes, surprised by the sound, as if it belonged to someone else, and she was only borrowing it. Rex visited often. She rested her head against Mrs. Calder's legs, while the puppies explored the unfamiliar geometry of rugs and table legs. Mrs. Calder's hand would settle into Rex's fur without hesitation. No apology, no fear. Being believed had done that. The investigation didn't end loudly, it widened. Records were reviewed, patterns connected, decisions made quietly but firmly. There were consequences, not all of them immediate, enough of them real. Mara visited the cabin one afternoon, her coat dusted with pollen instead of snow. She knelt to check the puppies with practiced gentleness, her smile lighter than Ethan had ever seen it. "This is how it's supposed to end," she said, watching them sleep in a warm knot. Ethan nodded. Endings like this were rare, worth guarding. His orders came through in early April, a reassignment, but not a departure. He would remain in Pine Hollow to help establish a regional K-9 search and rescue training program. Active duty, local integration. Work that required patience more than speed, attention more than force, continuity, purpose rooted in place. Ethan accepted without hesitation. He still ran most evenings, boots tracing the same paths that once carried him away from memory. Now they carried him through it. Rex ran beside him, pace measured, breath steady. She no longer scanned shadows for threat. She scanned for him. The town adjusted in small ways. A warming shelter appeared near the river path, stocked with blankets replenished by many hands. Conversations shifted. Less assumption, more attention. People learned to ask the second question. One evening, Ethan returned to the bench by the river where it had begun. The snow was gone. Grass pushed through damp earth. He sat for a moment, Rex settling beside him. He reached into his pocket and touched the repaired collar he still carried, the break left visible, not as a wound, but as proof. He didn't put it on her. He didn't need to. Rex leaned against his leg, solid and warm, eyes half closed in the fading light. Ethan understood then what Winter had asked of him. Not heroics, not sacrifice, attention. The willingness to stop when it would have been easier to keep moving. They stood and walked home together, the river moving quietly beside them, carrying away the last traces of cold. Some endings were not endings at all. They were places where life finally had room to stay.